Say, we've got an interesting topic today, but I got a couple questions for you. Let me know, has anyone ever heard the phrase extend an olive branch? Yeah, okay. How about the phrase, we fall down, but we get up? Yeah? All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because the organization we have today provides that kind of service to our community, within our communities. We've got Linda Ketcham. She is the executive director of JustDane. And JustDane works for our with communities throughout Dane County, providing support and assistance and olive branches and helping people get up when they fall down, helping those who want to be better to do better. And that's within all of our communities throughout Dane County. I tell you, it's a resource that maybe you know someone that has had to reach out to or will have to. But with all of our communities, this resource is available to them. And I wanted to bring her in today just to share this information, a great educational opportunity today. So please give Linda Ketcham a big round of applause, because I think she's got some really good information for us today. So help her. There you go, Linda.
Thank you, Janice. Let's see here. Thank you for letting me join you while you're eating lunch and talk a little bit about the work that we do at JustDane. Anybody here, because not everybody has heard of JustDane, but has anybody here ever heard of Madison Urban Ministry? So that's JustDane. We changed our name about 5 years ago to better reflect the geographic area that we work with and the communities we work with. So JustDane was founded in 1971 as Madison Urban Ministry. We have a long history of focusing on justice, on community relationships, and breaking down barriers to build up our community. So really working to address, and many of the things we worked on early in our history were issues of fair and affordable housing, racial inequities, access to quality education, making sure that our most vulnerable neighbors were supported. We have many values, but our 4 core values: inclusion, every person matters. We welcome everybody where they're at. We have compassion, right? We believe in charity and justice always, and that those are partners. They're not an and/or situation. We also believe that forgiveness, right? Each of us, how many of you have never made a mistake? Show of hands. One brave soul over there. I bet nobody in your family is here to refute that, right? That's okay. I just like hearing it. So the forgiveness piece is about remembering that each one of us is much, much more than the worst thing we've ever done or the worst decision we've ever made. And it's a call back to our history as an organization as well, having been created out of a number of faith communities in the Dane County area. And then finally, courage. We have a long history of being advocates in our community for budgets that reflect our values, for addressing racial disparities in the criminal legal system, in education and housing. And we believe that, it's not always easy to speak up. Right? So this courage piece of it is about speaking up, not just for the people who come through our doors on whose behalf and with whom we're working, but also speaking up in our community to say, we can do better. We can do better than a rising family homelessness rate. We can do better than racial disparities that mean 50% of the people in our prisons in Wisconsin are people of color, while only 6% of our population in the state are people of color. So it's having that courage to do both, be advocates for our clients, but also within the community for justice. We use a restorative justice framework. Our goal of our services, in particular, any of our services, including advocacy, is to help build a stronger community and help restore and repair harm. And that means when someone's been victimized, that we work to support them as they heal from that victimization. It also recognizes that many of the people who have committed crimes or have hurt someone have also themselves experienced harm. And so working with our participants who are coming out of prison and jail to help repair the harm and restore them as well. And then also holding our community responsible for the conditions we allow to exist within the community. So we do a lot of work with people returning home after incarceration. Now, anybody want to guess, in Wisconsin right now, on average, as we're here today together, there are about 22,000 people in our state prison system. We're paying about $40,000 a year for each one of them to be in prison. That doesn't count the people in jail, and it doesn't count people in federal prison. We spend billions of dollars to incarcerate people, many of whom are in there for low-level, nonviolent offenses that include drug offenses. Our prison systems are overburdened, and people often don't get the programming that they're supposed to get before they get discharged because there's too many people in the prison to get the services they need. Now, along with the 22,000 or so people who are in our state prisons, we have about another 70,000 people who are on state supervision, which means essentially probation or parole. And all of those individuals, when you have that conviction, you have a list of rules and regulations you have to live by. And those can create some significant barriers when you're trying to rebuild your life and trying to do better. So the reentry process has a lot of barriers for people coming home. People wonder, where am I going to sleep? We work at JustDane, we work with about 450 people a year who come back to Dane County from our state prisons. Did you know we had that many folks? That's just a percentage of who comes home. Most of them are coming home without housing. Part of the barrier to that is they don't have income. Part of the barrier is that when you go to prison, if you did have housing and you were on a lease, were you able to keep paying the rent for your apartment or your housing when you went to prison? No, you lost. So you have an eviction history on your record. So you come out, you don't have housing. The shelters our homeless shelters are seeing record numbers of people right now, and for many people who come out of prison, the shelter doesn't feel safe, especially for older adults. So one of the things that we're seeing at JustDane, and this is a national trend, is that the fastest growing age demographic in our prison system, anybody want to take a guess?
Over 60?
55 and older. It's the fastest growing age group in our prisons. There's a few reasons for that. The biggest one is that we send people to prison for very long periods of time. At JustDane right now, we have 127 people we're working with who are age 55 and older. 27 of them are age 65 and older. 5 of them are in their 80s. One of them just got out of prison in January of this year at age 83 after having been incarcerated for 56 years. So if you can imagine coming out at 83, 56 years in, his family is gone. Think about what technology was 56 years ago. Think about what this community looked like 56 years ago. All of those changes. In many ways, when you're incarcerated, time stands still. So he's having to navigate all of those challenges, all of those barriers. We don't have enough senior housing in Dane County. We have a housing crisis, and that includes senior housing. Depending on the nature of your offense, when you come home from prison, if you have if you were incarcerated or have a drug-related conviction, anything that was considered violent, you can be denied not only senior housing, you can be denied a nursing home bed, an assisted living housing, senior housing, and rehab beds. So we worked with individuals who have to have knee or hip replacements, and they've used all of their money on a hotel because they couldn't get a rehab bed. They were denied a rehab bed. And one of those individuals was actually someone who was exonerated. His conviction was overturned, but because it was still on our state record system, he was denied a rehab bed after a massive stroke. And he was just discharged to his apartment with no home health, because home health can also deny assistance for anyone with those offenses. So that, I wanted to kind of make sure I mention that, because obviously that impacts our community, and those are really high need things. I think, Janice, you mentioned someone coming from ADRC in the next couple of months, and we work very closely with them for folks who are returning home who are elderly. People wonder, how do I connect with my family, right? Families, especially your kids, how do you reconnect, right? There can be a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of anger there, and so how do people try to reconnect when you're a parent? Our programs, the programs that we offer, the other barriers, things like when you're on supervision, so probation or parole in Wisconsin, again, they call it supervision, extended supervision, you can't just sign a lease. You have to get the permission of your agent, your supervision agent. So the Department of Corrections has to approve where you want to live and okay you signing a lease. You cannot buy a car without your agent's permission. You cannot obtain a loan or borrow money from anyone without your agent's permission. You can't travel outside of the geographic area listed in the rules of your supervision, so you have to go through special avenues to attend a family funeral, to go visit family in other places. We also have this odd rule in Wisconsin that says when you're convicted of a crime and we send you to prison, we're going to send you back to the community in which you were convicted, where you committed that crime, even if you never lived there. So if I'm from Rockford and I drive up to, or I'm from Baraboo and I drive down to Madison or Fitchburg, and I commit a crime here, and I'm caught, and I'm convicted, and I'm sent to prison, I'm not allowed to go back to Baraboo where I might have family and support. I have to be here in Dane County, where I've never lived, where I don't have any support, where I don't know what resources are available. And that's a rule we could undo, and that's some of the advocacy work that we focus on a bit. Again, and that can be a barrier too, right? And sometimes you just have to be really smart and know how to navigate the system. At JustDane, one of the things we do, most of my colleagues at JustDane actually have been convicted of crimes, and most of my colleagues at JustDane, so we have 34 staff, and 65% of our staff across all our programs are people who have served time in prison. And they have turned their lives around, obviously. And they are a support and a mentor and some hope for the people that we work with. And they're, I will say, some of the best employees, best colleagues I've ever worked with. So, and one of them, sometimes I lose my train of thought. So one of them was a young man named Gennard. He was on probation and parole. Yes, you can be on both for 2 different offenses. He got off parole early because he was doing so wonderfully, but he was still on probation. He got married, and his wife, who had applied and been accepted to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York for the PhD program, so they were going to move there. So he had talked to his parole agent, or his probation agent, told them that he wanted to move, and this particular agent said, no, you can't. He had a job lined up. The state of New York said, we will accept him under an interstate compact. We'll accept him and do the supervision of him. But no, he can't go. And this sometimes happens, and there was no good reason for it. He'd been out of prison for 12 years with not as much as a blip on his record. But he's a smart guy. So his wife moved to Ithaca. And he asked his agent, can I transfer my supervision to Milwaukee County? Because I have a cousin I can live with in Milwaukee. And this is sometimes where those biases and racial prejudices can come in, because a lot of agents look at Milwaukee as, oh, this is a horrible place to be, and there's rampant crime, and, nobody wants to go to Milwaukee, but if this guy wants to go to Milwaukee, sure, we'll approve his transfer of supervision. So they let him go to Milwaukee. He moved in with his cousin. He lived with his cousin for 2 months, got to know his new probation agent, built a great relationship with them, and applied again for an interstate compact, which was granted. He moved to Ithaca. All these years later, he's still in Ithaca. I should have brought it because he was written up last year in the Ithaca paper as one of the 40 to watch, because he has purchased and renovated the entire second floor of an old factory and turned it into an art center that he's operating and educating youth. He's a gifted artist. He's a really gifted artist. So just an example sometimes of how people have to really game the system. So a little bit, I've talked about the obstacles. Employment can be difficult. It's been a little less difficult for folks right now because we need folks to be employed. So job market has been pretty good. When I started at JustDane 19 years ago, about 30% of our program participants could find employment, and about 70% could find housing. Now, about 80% of our participants find employment. Sometimes the hard part is helping them retain it because they need some additional support. And only about 25% are finding permanent housing. And it's just a reflection of the housing market. Landlords can be very, very particular. And if you have a conviction history, they are just essentially saying no. Wisconsin, before 2011, had some good protections for people that after a certain period of time, a landlord could not consider your conviction history unless it related to certain kinds of offenses in renting to you. But all of those tenant rights have essentially been stripped out of our state law over the last 14 years. So our Journey Home program is a signature initiative of the United Way. We focus on connecting people with residency, employment, support, education, and treatment. So we call it RESET, right? Helping people rebuild. So we work with landlords to develop relationships. We work with people on how do you improve your credit history? How do you do, for folks who don't have experience budgeting, right? The gentleman who came out after 56 years incarcerated, budgeting wasn't something he had to do for 56 years. So working on setting up a budget, connecting people with those resources that they need, connecting them, our staff worked with it, took him over to ADRC, worked with ADRC to make sure he was enrolled in any programs for which he was eligible. Support, we have a support group called the Phoenix Initiative. If you're the image of the phoenix rising from the ashes, and actually the young man I talked about in Ithaca is the one who put the curriculum together for that group for us all those years ago. It's been running all these years. And it's facilitated by 2 of our staff who have lived experience with incarceration as well. So they are in there. There's usually a specific topic that they're talking about, but there's also time to just talk about the frustrations that people are dealing with. Case management support, we have soft skill employment training, so just again related to helping people get jobs. We have a monthly service fair. It's a one-stop shop. We have about 40 other nonprofits that join us at Madison College and set up tables. And it's for folks to come and get lots of information and learn about resources in the community all in one spot. Because, the bus system, we have a decent transit system, but when you come out of prison and you need to be 6 places in one day for appointments and you're relying on the bus, it often can't be done during the hours in which those businesses operate. So so it's nice when we can bring all these vendors, all these agencies together. Parenting Inside Out is a parenting class for parents who are coming out of prison. It includes the other caregivers, so part of the focus. It's an evidence-based program, and it helps strengthen the relationship between the parents. Reentry peer support, case management, and peer support for individuals. Peer support are people who have their own lived experience with mental health and or addiction recovery, who are certified by the state of Wisconsin, and they walk side by side with somebody who has those same issues coming out of jail or prison. Our Just Bakery program is a vocational training program for individuals who have barriers to employment, conviction history, substance use, mental health, unhoused. Most of our students are unhoused. We have about 100 students a year. People learn commercial baking, They can earn nationally recognized credentials through the National Restaurant Association Manage First curriculum, which is the basis of the technical training they receive, but they also get case management, job support, peer support. And we have a commercial kitchen. They learn commercial baking. And we produce a line of baked goods in the community that we sell, and then that's reinvested into the program. In fact, the sales from our products, has anybody heard of Just Bakery? Okay. So the revenue for the sales is actually our single largest funding source for the program. Now,
Where are those products sold?
So you can order them online. You can order for delivery or pickup. Our bakery is over on Thayer Road on the east side of Madison. We have a number of churches and congregations that we have venues for during the summer months, starting in June through September. We are at the Hilldale Market on Wednesdays and Saturdays. We may be at one other market. I know just enough about Just Bakery to be dangerous, so the manager doesn't let me know too much about what's going on. But I know we're at Hilldale Market. Yes?
What's the name of the bakery?
It's called Just Bakery. I do have some information I should mention over here on the table, and that has some Just Bakery information as well. So, one of the, I also like to tell stories because I can just go through all sorts of facts and numbers. And so Phil was somebody who actually came to our Journey Home program. And Phil was out of prison. He'd served a number of years. He needed transitional housing. He was somewhat estranged from his family, and he really didn't know what he wanted to do. So he came through Journey Home, and he got a part-time job, but he really kind of was like, but I need a purpose. I need a purpose in my life, and this doesn't feel like it. So his resource specialist with Journey Home, his case manager, said, hey, we're just starting this bakery program. Why don't you give that a try? It's 12 weeks, it's 30 hours a week. It's an intense program. But it gives you some time. It keeps you busy, which is good. And maybe you'll like it. So Phil started the program, and he found the coursework a little challenging. But when he got into the kitchen and started working with dough and started baking cookies and bread and morning buns, he just started to thrive. He loved it. He found it therapeutic. I mean, how many of you like to cook or bake? Yeah. I mean, feeding people sometimes is purpose, right? So he excelled, and he started to mentor other students who were struggling with that. And we launched our product line. He was in the very first class of Just Bakery in 2000. He started in September of 2013. And we launched our product line in January of 2014, and we launched it at First Congregational United Church of Christ, which is one of the churches that have founded us as an organization. Phil came along with the baked goods. We brought $2,000 worth of baked goods, which I had never seen that much in terms of baked goods. And Phil was asked to speak, and he agreed to do that. So he went up to the pulpit, and he said, I grew up in a loving family. My parents worked hard. I never envisioned myself getting involved or being arrested or serving time in prison. But as a teenager, I started using drugs, and I became addicted. And that began a cycle of I would go to prison, I would come out, I would do okay for a little bit of time, and then I would relapse and I would go back into prison. He said, I reached a point in my life where he said, the only thing I thought I could make was a mistake. And then he kind of smiled, and he pointed at all those baked goods, and he just said, but now I can make all of this. And it was this transformative moment where he was willing to share his story, but to realize I can feed people. I can do something of purpose. So as the program grew, Phil graduated, and we needed an extra production staff person. So we hired Phil in February of 2014. Phil is still with us. He's our lead production specialist in the kitchen. He does sales, he does production, he does some mentoring with the students. he and his wife, I love this because Phil's kind of a funny guy. He said, look, I spent a lot of time sharing a small space with a lot of people, meaning prison. So when my wife and I got back together, we found a one-bedroom apartment. He said, because as much as I love my children and my grandchildren, I don't want anybody thinking they're coming to stay for more than an overnight. So, but he's this remarkable guy who needed a purpose, who needed an opportunity to do something different with his life, and he needed somebody who believed in him and somebody who understood what those barriers and challenges were to keep encouraging him. And yeah, he's our longest serving employee in Just Bakery and one of our longest serving employees at JustDane. I didn't mention our Circles of Support program, which is it falls under Journey Home, but Circles of Support we've been operating since 2003. And the Circles of Support are community-based volunteers who agree that we recruit and train, and they agree to meet once a week with someone newly released from prison to serve as a new support group, to help build social capital, to support them, to be a safe place to talk about what's going on. And the circles meet, sometimes they're meeting in restaurants, sometimes they're meeting in the community, sometimes in our office. And those can be transformational, because when you think about those barriers, right, to have community volunteers who are engaged and active in the community be able to say, you know what, I have a friend who has a business and they're looking for employees. You can use me as a reference. Go apply for that job. The same thing with landlords. But the purpose is that circle becomes a new sense of community and a new support network. And when it works exactly the way we want it to work, when that person finishes, who we call the core team member, that person who was released from prison, when it works exactly the way we want it to, the core team member, when they finish the program, they come back and they volunteer to be on a circle. And we have a number of former core team members who are volunteers on Circles of Support now. So I don't want to forget to mention that. If anyone's looking to volunteer, just, I throw it out there. Now, one of the things, a lot of times people will ask us, do these programs work? In the state of Wisconsin, the return to prison rate, people who come out and go back within two to 3 years, anybody want to guess what it is?
Why did they go back?
67%. So almost 7 out of 10.
Why?
I think they go back because there's not enough support. Sometimes it's because of their own behavior.
Right. But the thing about it, what I said that, is that you go to prison, they ain't doing nothing for you in prison.
Right?
They ain't got no support, no job for you to go out when you do get out.
Right.
And Wisconsin is one that's reflected on this, they don't do nothing for them.
You're exactly right. There are programs in prison. There aren't enough spaces in them for everyone who needs them to get them.
Yeah, but they're trying to build a brand new prison now, and the President of the United States want to open up Alcatraz. Now tell me about this.
Oh, I can't tell you how that makes any sense. Our goal at JustDane and through our advocacy work is we want to see fewer people in prison. We don't need to incarcerate the number of people that we incarcerate.
I agree with you.
That's some of the advocacy. It's also why we work with some other groups in the state and in Wisconsin and in the community in terms of criminal justice system reform, right? We've got people sitting in prison for low-level drug offenses we've got people sitting in prisons because we didn't have enough community-based mental health services for them to get appropriate treatment. And then while they were in the midst of their illness, they commit a crime. We could remember I said about $38,000 to $40,000 a year to incarcerate somebody? For Just Bakery, the Journey Home, and Circles of Support, we can work and support that same person in the community for $3,000 a year.
But you spend $750 trillion to go fight this war, which we don't have anything to do with.
Yeah.
The
it's,
President of the United States wants to buy a brand new plane, and it costs $1 billion.
you won't get any argument out of me about the
So
absurdity.
where's the money at?
I will say, and if you go to our website, you'll see that we spend a lot of time focusing and helping people understand the current administration, how the cuts they're proposing in federal spending will decimate our communities, all for the sake of giving tax cuts to the most wealthy, all for the sake of, right, could you use a tax cut? But if you look at most recent, without getting, I'm going to get political. I don't even call it political, right? It's the reality of what we're looking at is the budget proposal that's before Congress right now adds to the deficit. It proposes to cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, food stamps, education, housing funding for shelters and other housing programs, including to veterans.
So how do you
And it
pay-
still adds to the deficit. How do we do that?
How do you
Because the
put
tax
the bill?
cuts. Pardon?
How they, all these cuts that they're coming through, how these people supposed to live?
Don't know that.
Get
Yep.
rid of the bad guys.
Right.
Get them out of there.
So, I think, and I know I still have a few more slides, but you won't get any argument from me about any of this. In fact, I'd come over and give you a big hug later.
Say it the way it is.
Right? We are, yeah. And that's part of why we get in this advocacy, because I can see on a daily basis every one of the people in our programs. The gentleman who's 83 years old, who got out of prison, he doesn't have enough work credits for Medicare. His Social Security payment is going to be virtually nothing because he hasn't paid into the system for 56 years. He'll get Medicaid if they don't cut that. He's going to have to find a job at 83. And so this is a guy, I will just share this little story. So he started working with us, and he has a circle of support. And John Givens on our staff, John's been with us for 15 years, I think about now, 14, 15 years. He's been out of prison for many years, but John took him to food pantry and everything. Well, this gentleman comes back a few weeks later. He's working with the pantry system now, and he's carrying grocery bags. And he came in and he said, "They gave me more food than I can eat at the pantry. And I thought you might have people here who don't get enough food at the pantry, so I wanted to bring my extra food here so I could share it with other people." That's who I want to elect. That's the guy I want to elect. And that's part of who we incarcerate, right? We have this, we feed into, people buy into these ads in political, in election years about how bad people are. No, I would much rather spend my time with that gentleman than with most of the elected officials I know. Anyway, so I asked the question, do these programs work? So 67% of people who come out of prison go back within 3 years. The people who come through the Journey Home, Circles of Support, Just Bakery, or our peer support program, our 2-year return to prison rate has fluctuated from 2005 to last year, 2024, from 7 to 10%. It's a significant savings to our state, to our community, and it demonstrates how when we invest in the community-based services and in people in our community, we can change the trajectory of somebody's life. And I did want to touch briefly, we have some youth programs, and I want to leave some time for questions as well. So we have a mentoring program for kids who are impacted by parental incarceration. A lot of those kids are being raised by grandparents in the community. A lot of those grandparents and those kids are going to be hit by these cuts in this budget. They're already struggling. We see grandparents who have to go back into the workforce to support the kids, their grandkids as they're raising them. Drive to Succeed is a program that's focused on helping justice-involved kids. We work with Operation Fresh Start on that, so helping them get their driver's license, their high school diploma, because those are the two most frequently referenced requirements for a job in Dane County. And when we can help kids get that, I know when I went to high school, driver's ed was included in high school. We don't do that now. So
They don't have it now. but
we don't have it.
When I went, they had it.
Yep. And because we don't have it in high school, it's a financial barrier for lower income families to be able to get their kids to get driver's licenses. Just a few things. Kids who have an incarcerated parent, and this is part of why we have a program for them, no parent does their time alone. The kids worry about their parents. The kids face increased housing instability, increased risk of living, going into or further into poverty. There can be a lot of instability. They may change schools quite a few times. The trauma associated with the loss of their parents. Sometimes they saw their parent arrested, which is a whole nother level of trauma. And there's a potential to enter the foster care system. So we want to support them through our Mentoring Connections program, which we've been running since 2004. And Healing House is a 24/7 recuperative medical shelter for families that are experiencing homelessness and have someone being discharged from the hospital. If you can imagine, how many of you are parents? Anybody parents? You can think back to the day you delivered, to the day you got that baby. If you had no place to go when the hospital discharged you, but our shelter system, our larger shelter system. Now think about, you have no place to go, you had a C-section, and your baby is coming out of the NICU because they were born prematurely. So Healing House is that place where the hospital can refer the family to come and stay. They get shelter. We have a nurse on staff who monitors their recuperation from whatever illness, and it's been the whole gamut, including a 14-year-old who was terminally ill, and she and her mom had been living in a car. So we were able to have them come and be with us. And on any given night in Dane County, there's 75 families on a waiting list for family shelter. And that includes families who have somebody coming out of the hospital and need that recuperative care. We're the fiscal agent for lots of different organizations. Any of you heard of Project Home? No? Okay. Project Home helps out, was the first organization we were the incubator for, and they spun off. But they help low-income seniors stay in their housing by doing low-cost repairs, upgrades, that kind of thing. I won't go through all of these, but we're especially active for a long time with the Allied Duns Marsh Neighborhood Association as well, which also incorporates part of Fitchburg. And I mentioned the advocacy piece already. We also do reentry simulations, so large role play, an opportunity for somebody to come in and take the identity of someone newly released from prison and try to maneuver all those tasks that you have to do in the first 30 days. So that's a little bit, actually probably for you, you feel like that's a lot in terms of what we do. I did want to ask kind of if there's some questions that folks have. I know we've kind of been answering those as we go along, but I do want to say, when your comment, you know, some of the absurdity of what our prison system does is, as you said, that we have so many people in prison, we only have so many program beds, but everybody, when you get sentenced with, you need these programming needs, and you're not going to get out until you've met those programming needs. But when you go into the prison, if there's not enough beds for you, the question is, are all of our volunteer opportunities online? Yes, you can go to our website, JustDane.org. It might take you first to JustDance.org, but that's not us, although we do like a good party for the staff. But yeah, JustDane.org, and there are opportunities. You can look up the programs. Mm-hmm. Well, and that's part of the training.
Excuse me, Linda, can you?
Oh, sure. So how do we, especially if we're a little older and we might feel a little uncomfortable, worry about our safety working with someone who's coming out of prison, how do we address that? So there is a training process. There are some pretty strict rules around the circles of support in terms of, the circle members meet as a group. So it's against the rules of the program for for the core team member, the person who's coming back from prison, to ask to meet individually with a circle member. It has to be in that group. So there's that protection. John Gibbons, our staff person, John, for the first at least month that a circle is meeting, he's meeting as part of the circle so that he's seeing what's going on. And then he's also doing case management with the person outside of the circle. So we do training, we do screening. Sometimes we make a determination that, you know what, this individual should have an all-male circle. And so some circles are mixed gender, some are only work with, are all men, work only with men, some are all women, work only with women. We have two circles that have gone through special training to support members of the LGBTQ community who are returning home after incarceration, because there are other challenges and barriers sometimes that they're facing as well, and those circles are comprised of members of the LGBTQ community who have gone through that training. So we do what we can to build a tight parameter around that and protect people both physically but also from any potential exploitation. So could I ever say with 100% guarantee that something couldn't happen? No, but usually most of the people, I will say this, because John goes into the prisons and meets with people for several months before they get out. So by the time they get out and we match them in a circle, John has already built a relationship with them and has known them for a number of months before they're matched. So that's another precaution that we take in terms of, and sometimes we say, this person is not appropriate for a volunteer circle, in which case their circle becomes staff. So there's a number of ways we try to, we've put some safeguards in place.
The school system needs change. The worldwide.
School system needs changing.
Worldwide, because the kid that's in the 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, okay, they're getting a good education, but what they gonna learn, what they gonna do when they get out? Besides doing, what about the kids that don't go to college?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what you training them for?
Yeah, I mean, there is an increasingly we're seeing skilled trades being brought into the schools, because you're right, college is not for everybody. Not everybody wants to go to college.
I agree with you.
My daughter wishes her boyfriend wanted to go to college, but that's not his trajectory. So, yeah, we need skilled trades programs. We need a variety of career pathways for students coming out of high school that might include college, it might include trade school, it might include community college. You're right. And we've even, with our Just Bakery program, when we're able to find funding for it, we've done youth cohorts in the summer so that the kids come with us. They learn how to bake. They get life skills training, employment skills training. We pay them to participate, so they get $2,000 to come, so it's kind of their summer job. And they earn a nationally recognized certificate, ServSafe certificate. So because so many of them will enter into food service for high school jobs and college jobs and beyond. And that's a credential that when they apply for a food service job, they can say, no, I want $2 an hour more for this job. And because employers are required, if they do anything with food, to have people on staff at all times who have that credential, they can get it. So yeah, but we do need more youth training. You know, it's interesting. So what are we going to do about the mental health in Wisconsin? The Department of Health Services just last week held a listening session with agencies like ours who work with people returning home from prison to hear about the challenges and to make recommendations. Whether funding is there for it, I don't know, and part of what we all need to be concerned about with the proposed cuts at the federal level is much of our safety net related to mental health and drug treatment in Wisconsin is funded through Medicaid. When Medicaid funds are cut, we will see reductions in funding for mental health services unless the state steps up, the city and the county step up to fund that. But the only way they can do that will be to increase taxes. So that's the other thing to remember. Anytime they cut our taxes at the federal level, they're just passing the burden, the financial burden onto state and local municipalities, hoping that then when we get mad about increasing taxes, we forget that they're the ones who started all this rolling downhill, right? I won't say what rolling downhill, but you know. But it is. We could be facing a real crisis in terms of funding for next year. The City of Madison Community Development Division, which funds services in the community for mental health and housing, half of their budget is HUD money, housing and urban development money. much of which is being proposed to be cut. And that would mean cuts to the Salvation Army shelter, women's shelter, family shelter, porch light shelter, the road home shelter, housing and case management services, all of those services. So the only way that those services could stay in place would be if the city says we're gonna have to take everything we use to fund other services and put it over here, and the county is in the same boat. So it is with these cuts, and how we expand services is gonna be really incredibly difficult over the next at least 2 years, depending on what happens with midterm elections. But that is the fiscal reality of what this proposed budget bill could do, is it could decimate.
Question for you.
Janice asked, which communities do we find the most need? So most of the individuals with whom we're working reside, if it's hard, sometimes it's hard to say because so many of our participants are unhoused, so their addresses are the Beacon or Porch Light or Salvation Army shelters. But we find Fitchburg, south side of Madison, the north side of Madison, Sun Prairie. That's where the majority of our program participants come from. We have people from all over the county, but those are the communities where we see most of our participants coming from. The need is great, and that includes the reentry support, it includes children's services, it includes employment support services. And yeah, we about 20% of our participants live in Fitchburg. So we see folks here, Madison, I mentioned Allied Drive, which has been a historically and I think intentionally underserved community. And they have residents there who do wonderful work in terms of the Wellness Center, the Neighborhood Association, Allied Partners, and we see that in neighborhoods that are historically and intentionally underserved, but the need is very great in those neighborhoods. Any other questions? And I'm happy to stay around for a while. Again, reentry supports, putting community-based services in place to help people who are struggling with mental health and addiction work. They work when people can access them and when we have enough of them, when we don't have the long waiting lists that we have right now for mental health and substance use services. And it's much less expensive in the long run than paying $38,000 to $40,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. And especially when we're incarcerating people, I mean, think about that difference for the 450 people that come through our Circles of Support, Peer Support, Journey Home, and Just Bakery programs. Statistically, in the state of Wisconsin, 67% of those individuals would go back to prison within 2 years. When we track those participants and we track them through the Department of Corrections, and we see that 7 to 10% of our participants go back within that time frame, you can start to calculate what the cost savings is to provide community-based services versus just this revolving door because we don't have the supports people need. Again, thank you so much for inviting me and letting me talk your ear off about the work we do at JustDane. We have a very committed and passionate staff across all our programs. We have 32 staff who work in all of the programs, and they do a fantastic job. So, all right.
Okay, well, big hand for Linda. Thank you very much, Linda. That's a lot of good information. I'm sure many of us learned a lot today. And she has a table full of information over here for all of you who want to pick some up on your way out. But thanks again, and we appreciate you taking the time to come out and talk to us.